Harihi Om. Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunaktu, Sahaviryan Kadavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastuma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Brinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Tried. So then it's been decided that they're all marching now to Kurukshetra, and so then they are, on their way. The soldiers were cheerful, and they shouted with joy. Yudhishthira rode in their midst. He was mounted on a golden chariot and dressed in golden armor. He held his great spear. By his side rode Arjuna with Krishna as his charioteer. On numerous chariots around Yudhishthira his treasury was carried, along with the servants and attendants of the army. Behind the army came a long line of supply chariots, holding provisions, spare weapons, and other goods. Thousands of physicians and surgeons were also in attendance. As the army traveled, the Pandavas arranged for charity to be distributed to Brahmins along the way. They passed near many villages and colonies, but they carefully avoided temples and hermitages so as not to defile any holy place, and thus bring misfortune upon the army. Right? So they're always considering what's right and wrong, not, okay, we're going for battle, so it doesn't matter what happens, or this kind of thing, or I'm in the mood, so it doesn't matter, I don't have to follow etiquette, or no, they always follow etiquette. Brahmins continuously recited Vedic mantras along the length of procession of millions of men. Stopping each night at sunset and camping wherever they were, they went by slow marches. On the sixth night they reached Kurukshetra, where they camped around Lake Hiranyavati. In the center of the encampment, Service erected a large tent for the Pandavas. This tent would also serve as the battle headquarters. Surrounding it, Krishna, Dristadumna, Drupad, Virat, and the other army chiefs had tents erected. So in the middle you have the Pandavas' tent, and around that the other generals, their tents, and those would act, and then behind that would be, the men and all their arrangements. The provisions were also placed in well-guarded tents near the center. The armor, weapons, and chariot parts placed in piles resembled large hills, as did the heaps of grains, ghee, honey, and other foodstuffs. Right, so they go out there, they take cooks, they eat properly and everything, because here it's a matter of, you have gentlemen fighting, so it's formal. And so at the arranged time you start fight, at the arranged time you stop fight. Fight only in a certain area, and then, and the rules regarding the fighting. So in this way, then when they go back in the evening after the battle, then, they can have properly cooked foods, and they have proper places to sleep and everything like that. They sit, they talk, they, discuss things of the day, relax and everything, so the next morning they're fresh, and then they can properly start fighting again. So it means you have the aspect of winning, but it's not that in endeavoring for winning you lose your culture and just become like animals. Many thousands of elephants had been assembled, looking like moving mountains and wearing coats of steel covered with spikes. There were also fighting machines of all types who were capable of throwing rocks, iron pellets, burning oil, lances, and red-hot iron shot. Means those can be used for the foot soldiers. You don't use those on the charioteers, because charioteers fight charioteers, foot soldiers fight foot soldiers, like that. After conferring with Krishna, Dristadumna and his own brothers, Yudhishthira had the army settled to await the commencement of battle. Some miles away they could hear the Kaurava forces rumbling like thunder in the distance. All that was required now was a meeting between the leaders of both armies in order to agree on a day for the fighting to begin. When Krishna had left Hastinapur, Duryodhana went to his counselors and said, "Having thwarted our attempts to capture him, Krishna has gone back to the Pandavas. Without doubt he will be angry with us and will incite the Pandavas to fight to their full power. There will be a battle that will make our hair stand on end. We should not lose time in arranging our forces. Have them proceed at once to Kurukshetra. Let the road between here and there be leveled and cleared. We ourselves should prepare to depart." The ministers, headed by Karna, Shakuni, and Dushasana, got up from their seats and put on fine headdresses. Happy at the prospect of a battle, they slapped their arms and laughed. They brought out their weapons and had them located into their chariots. The entire city of Hastinapur was filled with the commotion of men preparing for battle. The city resembled an ocean with cars, elephants, and horses for its waves, and gleaming weapons for its foam. Drum beats and conch blasts were the ocean's roar, and the city's palaces were the mountains along its shore. Duryodhana rejoiced at the sights and sounds coming from his army. He personally oversaw the loading of weapons onto thousands of chariots, as well as bows, arrows, axes, spears, clubs, maces, and spiked bludgeons. There were massive pots of molasses and sand, which would be heated and then hurled at the enemy. There were large baskets full of poisonous snakes. Devices for throwing every kind of missile were loaded by the thousands. Right, so they had back then, missiles and all these different kinds of things. It's just not considered the main aspect of the warfare. You see, with his army, that's brought out more. So he's focusing more on his weaponry and everything like that. So the Pandavas and all that, they naturally did that, but the focus was on the performance of their duties and everything, and the respect you see amongst the elders and, the proper dealings and everything like that. So they're both making the same arrangements, just the differences, as we can see, is where their focus lies. Chariots were filled with bullets, bombs, and other explosive weapons. The sight of all the weapons and missiles cheered the heroes and frightened the weak-hearted. Because they've always had these technologies, just that the Kshatriyas in the Veda culture didn't go so much for that. It was more about the bows and arrows, and you chant mantras on them if you need something more, rather than the technology of the exploding weapons and those kind of things, because it means it explodes a certain amount, not less, not more. Well, when you use the mantras, you can get something exact down to one person or a whole, battalion of men, depending upon, your potency in using the mantra and in what is needed, like that. So less gross, more refined, more scientific. The warriors gathered, wearing glittering robes embroidered with gold and adorned with gems. Powerful men clad in mail and masters of the use of weapons were appointed charioteers for more powerful fighters. The chariots were equipped with every kind of weapon, as well as drugs and herbs for curing wounds. Each chariot was drawn by 4 horses with bells and pearls strung around their necks. Tall standards had flags attached to them, and on the chariot turrets were ornaments, shields, and swords, their blades pointing outwards. They looked like moving fortresses and were difficult to approach. The great war elephants were decked in armor decorated with jewels and wreaths of pearls. 7 men rode on the back of each. 2 who were expert bowmen, 2 swordsmen, 2 bearing hooks, and 1 armed with a lance and trident. That's 7 men. So we get, generally in India, when they do the festivals and that, for the temple procession, you have 4 men on the back. So these means they're really big elephants, and they can get 7 men back there. I think also they would have those on the back, that place, that hoda. It's like a square where they can sit inside. So someone will be driving, and then probably 6 men that were in that hoda. The elephants rocked as they moved. Following them were thousands of horsemen, clad in mail and ornaments and holding up flags. The horses were the best of their species, all under full control and free from the habit of scratching the ground with their forefeet. Behind the horsemen came even more infantry, their polished armor shining in the sunlight. For every chariot there were 10 elephants. For every elephant, 10 horsemen. And for every horseman, 10 foot soldiers. So that would be how the army would work. So you have, because the charioteer will be the lead, then there's 10 elephants, right? Then there'll be then, for each elephant, then there's 10, so that means then there's 100 horsemen, and then for that, then there's 1,000 foot soldiers. So that would be one group, and then those go together in groups. As Duryodhana presided over his 11 akshauhinis, each containing over 20,000 elephants, right? So you can tell by the elephants, then if you can calculate from there how many people there are, right? Because we said before, so 1,000 foot soldiers, 100 chariots, and then 10, and then 11. So 1,111. Okay, that would be one group. So if there's 20,000 elephants, then it would be 20,000 times that 1,000. So that's like 1,000,000 people. And then he's got 11 of those. His heart swelled with pride. Seeing the endless procession of men, he wondered how the Pandavas would be able to even look upon them, right? Because he's just thinking by volume will just be defeat. He selected first-class warriors to lead each subdivision, and as leaders of the Akshauhinis, he appointed Kripa, Drona, Shalya, Jayadratha, Sudakshina, Kamboja, Kritavarma, Ashwatthama, Bhurishravas, Shakuni, and Bahlika. Right? So just as Yudhishthir had 7 generals, so that would be the 7 Akshauhinis. So he has 11, so he has 11 of the generals. Like that. When all the arrangements were underway, Duryodhana approached Bhishma and asked humbly, "Without a commander-in-chief, even a large army is broken in battle like a swarm of ants. Division leaders seldom agree and are usually jealous of one another, like, because being Kshatriyas, and they're always, they have the plan and like that, and so they'll fight. You surely know the story of how the Kshatriyas of the Haihaya race, although they were few, were able to defeat in battle the Brahmins united with the Vaishyas and Shudras. When the Brahmins asked the Kshatriyas why they were successful, they replied, 'In battle we listened to the commands of only the wisest person, but you were separated and followed your individual whims.' When they heard this, the Brahmins selected a suitable leader and were victorious over the Kshatriyas." That's the whole point. You have a leader and it all comes down, it'll work. You may say his plan is the best or not, someone else has a better plan, but unless you follow a plan under a leader, it won't work. Even if you have the best plan, if everybody else and they're all discussing and fighting over it, you'll lose. "We too need a leader, O grandfather. You are equal to Shukra himself. You always wish me well and always follow the path of righteousness. Therefore become my general. To the Kurus you are like the sun among luminous bodies, Kuvera among the Yakshas, Indra among the gods, Meru among mountains, and Garuda amongst birds. If you protect us, not even the gods in heaven can assail us. March at our front like Kartikeya, leading the celestials, and we will follow you like calves following a cow." The noble Bhishma looked down at Duryodhana, who stood with his hands clasped tightly. "It may be as you say, O ruler of men, but as you are to me, so are the Pandavas. It is equally my duty to look after them. Still, I will fight on your behalf, as I have promised." Right? He's pointing out it's my duty to protect both sides, because it's one family. Duryodhana is making it into two divisions. The Pandavas aren't. Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, Vidura, they're not. So it's just Duryodhana. But he says, as promised, I will fight on your side, since you are representing, at this point, who's actually practically has the crown. Bhishma remembered long ago a vow he had made to his father to always protect the king in Hastinapur, even though he himself would never be monarch. How could he have known it would come to this? Right? Because we see before, remember in the very beginning, then after the Pandu and Vidura and Dhritarashtra are born, and after some time, then we see that Vyasadeva came and told his mother, "It's time we go to the forest, because you won't want to see what happens after this." Right? If she had been there, the Queen Mother, and they're getting into all this, it would have been too much of a disturbance. So she went to the forest, Vanaprastha, just focusing on spiritual life. Thus, when Duryodhana had approached him some months ago to secure his assistance in the war, he had felt obliged to agree. Looking across at the great throne in the hall, where his own father had once sat, Bhishma continued, I do not see the warrior who can match my strength except Arjuna. He possesses wisdom and he knows the mantras for all the celestial weapons. But he will not encounter me in an open fight. I can quickly strip this world of men, gods, and asuras by the strength of my weapons. I will slay 10,000 warriors a day. However, king, I will not slay any of the Pandavas. Right, because he says it's his business to protect them both. But because he asks them to fight, then he'll fight, and like he said, he'll kill 10,000 warriors a day. Bhishma added, there's one other condition to my accepting leadership of the army. Either Karna fights or I fight. The Suta's son and I cannot fight together. Right. Karna retorted, I have already vowed that I will not fight while you are fighting. When you have been slain, O son of Ganga, then I will fight with the wielder of the Gandiva bow. Right. So Bhishma is saying he won't fight because, it's just improper, because he mentioned it was the Suta's son, because he's behaving that way. And Karna already said that he won't fight before because he got upset that Bhishma Dev is pointing out their behavior, that they're talking like they're so great and so easily can defeat the Pandavas, when Arjuna has already defeated them twice. And so then, he made this statement. And so now it's just confirmed. So here Bhishma is saying it, but then Karna is saying, no, but I already said. It's like the boss said, you're fired, and the person says, no, I quit. That kind of thing. Duryodhana gathered Brahmins and had them perform the rituals to install Bhishma as the commander-in-chief. Hundreds of drums and conches were sounded as his head was anointed with sacred water. The assembled warriors roared in delight. With Bhishma as commander who could defeat them, he was capable of annihilating armies single-handedly, and he could not be killed unless he chose to die. Outside the hall, however, frightful omens were seen as Bhishma was installed. Showers of blood fell from the sky and the earth shook. Fierce whirlwinds blew and trees toppled to the ground. Incorporeal voices cried out. Meteors shot across the sky and jackals howled. Afraid, Hastinapur's citizens made offerings to the gods. So this meteor shooting across the sky, the shooting stars. So kind of in the modern culture you think, oh, it's a nice sign, but actually it's inauspicious. And the other ones are obviously inauspicious. Right? Bhishma came out of the hall looking like the full moon. Worshipped by Brahmins, he mounted his chariot and set off for Kurukshetra at the head of a large division of soldiers. The Kuru army encamped on the western side of Kurukshetra. They resembled a vast sea. The soldiers in flashing armor looked like water sparkling in the sunlight. Warriors roared and conch blasts continuously sounded. At last the time for which a Kshatriya always longed had arrived. They would either be victorious in battle or die and attain the heavens. End of part 1. So part 2, deliverance.
This is actually now.
Okay. So we'll continue. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.